It was a snowy Christmas Eve in a small New England town. Emily and her husband, Tom, had just finished decorating their tree, their small home glowing with the warm light of candles and twinkling bulbs. The snowfall outside painted a picturesque holiday scene, the kind you'd see on a postcard. To complete the evening, the couple decided to take their dog, Max, for a quick walk before bed. Bundled up in heavy coats and scarves, they ventured into the quiet streets. The snow crunched under their boots as Max excitedly darted around, sniffing the fresh powder. The neighborhood was silent, save for the distant sound of wind chimes and the faint hum of Christmas music escaping from a nearby home. As they strolled past the rows of decorated houses, Emily noticed something odd. A man in an old-fashioned coat and hat stood motionless under a dim street lamp. His head was slightly tilted, and his face was obscured by shadows, but there was something unsettling about how still he stood. "Tom, look," Emily whispered, gripping his arm. Tom followed her gaze and saw the figure. Trying to lighten the mood, he called out, "Merry Christmas." His voice echoed slightly, breaking the stillness. The man didn't respond. He didn't move. For a moment, Tom and Emily exchanged uneasy glances, but they decided to continue their walk, cutting it shorter than usual. When they returned to their house, the man was gone. That night, Emily awoke to Max growling softly. She glanced at the clock. 2:17 a.m. Groggily, she nudged Tom awake and whispered, "Something's wrong. Max is growling." Tom groaned but sat up, listening intently. Then they both heard it, a faint creaking noise coming from downstairs. Tom grabbed the baseball bat he kept by the bed and motioned for Emily to stay close. With Max leading the way, his growling now more pronounced, they descended the stairs slowly. When they reached the living room, they froze. The front door was wide open, letting in icy gusts of wind. Snow had been tracked across the hardwood floor, leading in messy, wet boot prints from the door to their Christmas tree. Ornaments were shattered, and the tree itself leaned precariously, as though someone had bumped into it. Emily's breath caught in her throat as her eyes followed the trail of footprints. They didn't stop at the tree. They continued, one deliberate step at a time, leading to the base of their staircase. "Tom," she whispered, her voice trembling. They went upstairs. Tom tightened his grip on the bat and motioned for her to stay back. He began ascending the stairs, his heart pounding in his chest. At the top, he found nothing out of place. No one was there. But when he turned back toward the stairs, he noticed something chilling. The footprints had disappeared halfway up. The couple never discovered who the man was or how he had entered their home. The following Christmas Eve, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. They eventually decided to move, but Emily swears that every year, as the clock strikes midnight on Christmas Eve, she can still feel a pair of eyes watching their home from the shadows. Kevin and his friends had a cherished holiday tradition, a yearly trip to a remote cabin in the woods. This year, however, the snowfall was heavier than expected, and the journey became treacherous. By the time they arrived, the cabin looked different from how they remembered it. The paint was peeling, the windows were grimy, and the air around it seemed heavier, colder. "This place looks older," Sarah remarked as they stepped inside. Kevin laughed nervously. "It's probably just the snow making it look creepy. Come on, let's get the fire going." That first night, as the group settled in, Sarah found an old, dust-covered photograph tucked into the corner of a bookshelf. It depicted a family of 4 standing in front of the cabin. Their faces were stern, almost lifeless. "Check this out," Sarah said, holding up the photo. "Creepy, right? Looks like they never learned how to smile." The group laughed it off, but as the evening wore on, Kevin couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The trees outside seemed to loom closer, their gnarled branches scratching against the windows. At 3 a.m., Kevin awoke to the sound of deliberate, heavy footsteps on the porch. His first thought was an animal, but when he peered out the frosted window, his blood ran cold. A dark figure stood just beyond the porch, its back turned to the cabin. Kevin stared, unsure whether to wake his friends, when the figure moved. It turned slightly, and though its face was obscured, Kevin felt an overwhelming sense of dread. He stumbled back, knocking over a chair, which woke Sarah. "What's going on?" she whispered. Kevin pointed to the photograph on the kitchen table. It had moved since earlier, and the faces of the family had changed. Their mouths were now twisted into wide, grotesque grins. The whispers started soon after, faint at first, then growing louder. They seemed to come from the walls, from the very air around them. Panicking, the group grabbed their belongings and bolted for the door. It wouldn't budge. The whispers became deafening, almost a chant, as the lights flickered wildly. When the door finally gave way, the group sprinted to their car, not daring to look back. The next day, when they reported the incident to the local police, the officers found the cabin completely empty. No furniture, no photograph, no signs of recent occupants. The officer added one more chilling detail. The cabin had burned down years ago. To this day, Kevin refuses to spend the holidays anywhere near the woods. The Johnson family was famous for their extravagant Christmas light displays. Every December, their house became a dazzling beacon, attracting visitors from across the town. But last year, their cheerful tradition took a dark and unforgettable turn. Late one evening, Mr. Johnson was outside, fixing a strand of lights that had inexplicably gone out. The air was bitterly cold, and his breath came in visible puffs as he worked. As he straightened up to admire his handiwork, he noticed a figure standing across the street. It wasn't unusual for passers-by to stop and admire the lights, but this figure stood unnaturally still. Mr. Johnson squinted against the glare of his lights. "Merry Christmas," he called out, his voice cheerful but uncertain. The figure didn't respond. It simply stood there, shrouded in shadow. Shrugging it off as a prank, Mr. Johnson went back inside. Hours later, as the family prepared for bed, a strange humming sound filled the house. It was faint at first, then grew louder, almost mechanical. Mr. Johnson checked the window and felt his stomach drop. The Christmas lights on their house were flickering in an erratic, almost deliberate pattern. And there, in the yard, the figure stood once more, closer this time. He grabbed a flashlight and ventured outside, his heart pounding. But the figure disappeared as soon as he stepped onto the porch. Thinking it was just a prankster, he returned inside, but at exactly 3:33 a.m., the lights went out completely. The humming sound returned, now deafening. When Mr. Johnson looked out the window again, his blood ran cold. There were now multiple figures in the yard, their faces obscured by shadow. The family fled to a relative's home that night, returning the next morning to find their light display destroyed. Wires were torn, bulbs shattered, and in the center of their yard, scrawled into the snow, were the words, "We're watching." This year, the Johnsons decided not to decorate, but every night in December, a single strand of lights has flickered on their porch, and no one in the family claims to have put it there. Thank you for joining us for these spine-chilling holiday tales. The holidays might be a time for joy and cheer, but as these stories show, they can also hide darker secrets just beneath the surface. Which of these tales gave you the biggest chills? Let us know in the comments below, and if you have your own eerie holiday encounters, we'd love to hear them. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the shadowfiles.mp4 for more hair-raising stories every week. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and watch out for the shadows. Happy holidays and good night.